BTS didn't just top charts, they reshaped an entire company's DNA. At its peak, this 7-member group from South Korea was responsible for more than half of Hybe's total revenue. Album sales, sold-out stadium tours, brand deals worth hundreds of millions. A fandom that moved markets, BTS wasn't just Hybe's biggest act. They were Hybe. But here's the real question. If BTS were to officially disband tomorrow, not a hiatus, not solo projects, a full stop, would Hybe still stand as the entertainment giant it is today? The company now owns labels across 3 continents, manages over a dozen active groups, runs its own fan platform, and pulls revenue from gaming, merchandise, and content licensing. On paper, Hybe looks like it's already moved past the single artist dependency model. But has it really? Or is all of that infrastructure still standing on a foundation that one group built? Here are 7 facts that cut through the noise and answer that question with nothing but hard data and real business moves. Number 7. The Revenue Foundation, BTS. To understand how deeply BTS shaped Hybe's financial identity, you have to go back to before the name Hybe even existed. The company started as Big Hit Entertainment, founded by Bang Si-hyuk in 2005. Bang was a respected songwriter and producer. He'd worked with JYP Entertainment and helped craft hits for artists across the Korean music industry. But running his own label was a different game entirely. Big Hit's early years were rough. The company managed a few acts, including the ballad group 88 and a brief partnership with the group Glam, but none of these projects delivered the kind of commercial traction needed to sustain a label in the cutthroat K-pop industry. By the early 2010s, Big Hit was operating on thin margins, far from the financial powerhouse it would eventually become. Then came BTS. The group debuted on June 13, 2013, with 7 members, RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook. Their debut single, No More Dream, didn't exactly set the world on fire. In an industry dominated by groups backed by the so-called Big Three agencies, SM Entertainment, YG Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment, BTS was an underdog from a small label with limited resources. They didn't have the massive promotional budgets or established trainee pipelines their competitors enjoyed. What they did have was a different approach to connecting with fans. BTS used social media, YouTube, Twitter, and their own blog content to build a direct, personal relationship with their audience at a time when most K-pop groups still relied heavily on traditional TV appearances and managed public personas. The strategy worked, but it took time. Their early albums sold modestly by K-pop standards. Too Cool for School, RUL 82, and School Love Affair built a dedicated, but still relatively small fanbase. The real shift started in 2015 with I Need You, the lead single from The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Part 1. The song won BTS their first music show trophy on SBS's The Show, and album sales jumped noticeably. From that point on, each comeback brought bigger numbers. The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Part 2, later that year pushed further, and the combined repackage, The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Young Forever, in 2016, sold over 1 million copies. A significant milestone that put Big Hit on a genuinely different financial trajectory. But the real explosion came with the Wings album in October 2016. Wings sold over 1.5 million copies, and the lead single Blood, Sweat, and Tears dominated Korean charts. At this point, BTS was no longer just a successful group, they were Big Hit's entire business model. There was no other act on the roster generating comparable revenue. The company's financial reports made this painfully clear. BTS wasn't just the flagship artist. They were essentially the only artist producing meaningful income. Then 2017 happened, and everything changed on a global scale. DNA, the lead single from Love Yourself, Her, cracked the Billboard Hot 100 at number 67, the highest chart position for a K-pop group at the time. The album itself debuted at number 7 on the Billboard 200. American media took notice. Late-night show appearances followed. The AMAs. Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. Suddenly, BTS wasn't just a Korean phenomenon, they were a global act, and Big Hit's revenue reflected it immediately. And here's the number that matters most for this discussion. According to Big Hit's own IPO prospectus filed in 2020, BTS accounted for approximately 97% of the company's total revenue. Not 50%. Not 70%. 97. That's a staggering level of concentration for any corporation, in any industry. The company's entire financial existence, its payroll, its office leases, its expansion plans, its ability to sign new artists, all of it rested on the continued success of one group. The albums kept getting bigger. Love Yourself, Tear dropped in May 2018 and became the first Korean-language album to reach #1 on the Billboard 200, selling over 1.6 million copies in South Korea within its first month. Its follow-up, Love Yourself, Answer, also hit #1 on the Billboard 200 and pushed the combined Love Yourself series to over 10 million copies sold worldwide. Map of the Soul, Persona arrived in April 2019 and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 with 230,000 album equivalent units in the United States alone. Then came Map of the Soul, 7 in February 2020, which sold over 4 million copies in South Korea within its first week, a record that stunned even the most optimistic projections. Concert touring amplified the financial picture even further. BTS's Love Yourself World Tour, which ran from August 2018 to April 2019. Beyond music and touring, the brand deals added another massive revenue stream. BTS partnered with Samsung, Hyundai, Fila, McDonald's, Louis Vuitton, and Coca-Cola, among others. The McDonald's BTS meal launched in nearly 50 countries in 2021 and caused supply chain disruptions in several markets due to overwhelming demand. The Hyundai Research Institute estimated in 2018 that BTS contributed approximately $5 billion annually to the South Korean economy through tourism, consumer goods, and cultural exports. The South Korean government literally credited BTS as a factor in the country's soft power expansion. By the time Big Hit went public on the Korea Exchange in October 2020, now the largest IPO by a South Korean entertainment company, the market valued the company at approximately $8.7 billion on its first day of trading. Shares opened at 270,000 won, more than double the IPO price of 135,000 won. Investors were essentially betting on BTS. The prospectus itself listed dependence on a specific artist as a key risk factor. The company acknowledged it directly. If BTS's popularity declined, or if members departed, the company's revenue could be materially affected. This wasn't speculation from outside analysts. This was Big Hit telling its own investors, in a legal disclosure document, that its financial future was overwhelmingly tied to 7 people. And the market listened, but it also bought in anyway. The logic was straightforward. BTS's numbers were so large, their global reach so unprecedented for a K-pop act, and the growth trajectory so steep that investors calculated the upside outweighed the concentration risk. But the concentration risk was real, and everyone involved knew it. Big Hit knew it. Bang Si-hyuk knew it. The Korean Financial Supervisory Service, which reviewed the IPO filing, knew it. The 97% dependency figure wasn't a footnote. It was the central tension of the entire offering. This is the financial reality that Hybe was built on. Every strategic decision the company made after 2020, every acquisition, every new group launch, every platform investment, was made with one underlying motivation: reduce dependence on BTS before the clock ran out. Because military service was coming. Solo projects were coming. And the possibility of a full disbandment, however distant, was always part of the calculation. BTS didn't just help Hybe grow. For years, BTS was Hybe's growth. The company's entire valuation, its credibility with investors, its ability to acquire other labels and expand internationally, all of it traces back to the revenue and cultural capital that one group generated. That's not opinion. That's what the financial filings say. And it raises an obvious follow-up question. If HYB knew it couldn't stay a one-group company forever, what exactly did it do to change that? Number 6. The diversification playbook, HYB. The 97% problem wasn't a secret. Bang Si-hyuk and his executive team understood that building a multi-billion-dollar company on a single artist, no matter how phenomenally successful that artist was, created an existential vulnerability. Every entertainment company in history that depended too heavily on one act eventually faced a reckoning. The question was never whether the risk would materialize, but when. So HYB did what any competent corporation would do when staring at a structural weakness. It started building walls around the core business long before the storm arrived. The first and arguably most important move was Weverse. Launched in June 2019, Weverse was HYB's proprietary fan community platform, a digital space where fans could interact with artists, access exclusive content, purchase merchandise, and watch live broadcasts, all within a single ecosystem controlled entirely by HYB. This wasn't just a social media alternative. It was an infrastructure play. Instead of relying on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and third-party platforms to mediate the relationship between artists and fans, platforms that controlled the algorithms, took advertising revenue, and owned the user data, HYB built its own pipeline. Fans came to Weverse. They stayed on Weverse. And critically, they spent money on Weverse. The platform grew fast. Within its first year, Weverse accumulated millions of registered users drawn in by BTS content. But HYB didn't stop there. The company began onboarding non-HYB artists onto the platform, effectively transforming Weverse from an in-house fan club into something closer to a universal fan engagement platform for the entire music industry. In January 2022, HYB completed the merger of Weverse with V-Live, Naver's popular Korean live streaming service. The deal gave Weverse access to V-Live's massive existing user base and its live streaming infrastructure while consolidating the fan engagement space under HYB's roof. By 2023, Weverse had surpassed 100 million cumulative downloads globally, hosting communities for artists from HYB, YG Entertainment, Universal Music Group, and others. Artists like Blackpink, Dua Lipa, and Ariana Grande had Weverse communities, meaning HYB was now earning platform revenue from fans of competing labels' artists. That's a fundamentally different business model than selling albums. Weverse Shop, the integrated e-commerce arm, added another layer. Fans could purchase official merchandise, limited edition albums, photo cards, and exclusive products directly through the platform. This cut out traditional retail intermediaries and gave HYB direct access to consumer purchasing data, information that allowed the company to optimize product launches, forecast demand, and tailor offerings to specific fan demographics. The margins on direct-to-consumer merchandise sales are significantly higher than wholesale distribution through third-party retailers, and HYB leaned into this aggressively. The content production arm was another pillar of diversification. HYB didn't just release music, it produced an enormous volume of video content that generated revenue independently of album cycles. BTS alone had multiple documentary series. Burn the Stage was released as both a YouTube Red series and a theatrical film in 2018, Break Silence. The movie followed in 2020. Each of these content pieces extended the revenue life of the BTS brand beyond the traditional album tour merchandise cycle. But more importantly, HYB replicated this content model across its other groups. 17, TXT, Hybe, and Ellie Seraphim all had their own reality series, behind-the-scenes content, and Weverse exclusive programming. Then there was the intellectual property and licensing business. BT21, a collaboration between BTS members and Line Friends launched in 2017, created a set of original cartoon characters designed by the members themselves. These characters became a licensing juggernaut, appearing on clothing, accessories, stationery, home goods, food products, and even banking cards across Asia, North America, and Europe. BT21 pop-up stores drew massive foot traffic in cities like Tokyo, New York, Seoul, and Los Angeles. Tiny Tan, another set of animated characters based on BTS members, launched in 2020 and was licensed for mobile games, promotional campaigns, and consumer products. The critical insight here is that these IP properties generated revenue without requiring the physical presence or active participation of BTS members. The characters existed independently. They could be licensed indefinitely, regardless of whether BTS was on hiatus, in the military, or even disbanded. Gaming was another frontier. Hybe had a partnership with Netmarble, one of South Korea's largest mobile game publishers. BTS World, a narrative-driven mobile game, launched in June 2019. BTS Universe Story followed in 2020. While neither title became a dominant force in the global gaming market, they demonstrated the model, turning artist IP into interactive entertainment products. Hybe also invested directly in gaming companies and signaled repeatedly that it viewed gaming as a long-term revenue vertical, not just a promotional gimmick. The paid online concert model, born partly out of necessity during the COVID-19 pandemic, became a significant revenue stream in its own right. When live touring shut down globally in 2020, Hybe pivoted to virtual concerts. Bang Bang Con, the live in June 2020 drew approximately 756,000 concurrent paid viewers from over 100 countries, generating an estimated $20 million in ticket revenue from a single event. The production quality was high, multiple camera angles, custom sets, real-time fan interactions, and the economics were compelling. No venue rental. No travel logistics. No local promoter splits. A global audience paying ticket prices comparable to a physical concert, with a fraction of the operational overhead. Hybe continued to produce paid virtual events even after in-person touring resumed, creating a hybrid model that captured revenue from fans who couldn't attend physical shows. Hybe EDU, the company's educational content division, explored yet another angle. Learn Korean with BTS, launched in partnership with the Korean government's King Sejong Institute Foundation, used BTS content to teach the Korean language to international fans. While the direct revenue from educational content was modest compared to music and merchandise, it served a strategic purpose, deepening fan engagement, extending the cultural footprint of Hybe's artists, and positioning the company as a cultural institution rather than just a record label. By 2022, Hybe's revenue breakdown told a materially different story than it had just 3 years earlier. The company reported total revenue of approximately 1.78 trillion Korean won, roughly $1.4 billion USD for fiscal year 2022. While album sales and artist-related activities still formed a substantial portion, the platform segment, driven primarily by Weverse, Shop, and digital content, had grown into a meaningful contributor. Merchandise and licensing revenue was climbing. Content production was generating returns across multiple formats and distribution channels. The company was no longer a label with one superstar act. It was becoming a diversified entertainment and technology company with multiple revenue engines. The strategic logic was clear: make the company's survival independent of any single artist's activity status. If BTS went on hiatus, which they did in 2022 when members began their mandatory South Korean military service, the company needed enough alternative revenue streams to absorb the impact without a financial collapse. And to Hybe's credit, the infrastructure was largely in place before the hiatus began. Weverse was operational. The content library was deep. The licensing deals were active. The other artist rosters were generating their own sales momentum. But building revenue streams and replacing BTS-level revenue are two very different things. The platform could grow. The merch could sell. The content could attract viewers. None of that, on its own, replicated the cultural moment that BTS represented, the kind of phenomenon that made investors pay a 100% premium on IPO day, that filled 90,000-seat stadiums in hours, that moved governments to change conscription laws. Diversification reduced the company's dependency ratio on paper. Whether it replaced the gravitational pull that BTS exerted on the entire business, that's a question the numbers alone can't fully answer. And it turns out, Hybe wasn't relying only on organic growth and platform development to solve that problem. The company had a much bigger, much more expensive strategy already in motion, one that involved opening its checkbook and buying its way into entirely new markets. Number 5. The Acquisition Empire, Hybe. Hybe didn't just grow, it went shopping. And not small purchases. Between 2019 and 2021, the company executed a series of acquisitions that fundamentally transformed it from a Korean pop music label into a multinational entertainment conglomerate with operations spanning 3 continents, multiple music genres, and an artist roster that included some of the biggest names in Western pop music. Each acquisition was calculated, each one designed to solve a specific piece of the dependency puzzle. And when you lay them out in sequence, a clear corporate strategy emerges, one built on the understanding that surviving beyond BTS required not just new Korean groups, but an entirely new geographic and cultural footprint. The first significant acquisition came in July 2019, when Hybe, still operating as Big Hit Entertainment at the time, purchased Source Music. The deal was relatively modest compared to what would follow, but it was symbolically important because it signaled a new direction. Source Music was a mid-tier Korean entertainment company best known for managing Jimin, a 6-member girl group that had debuted in 2015 and built a solid domestic fan base. Jimin had charted multiple albums in Korea, won music show awards, and maintained a consistent presence in the K-pop market. They weren't global superstars on the BTS scale, but they were a proven act with an established revenue stream. The acquisition gave Big Hit something it had never had before, a girl group. Up until that point, Big Hit's active roster was overwhelmingly male. BTS and TXT, who had debuted in March 2019, were both boy groups. The K-pop industry's economics are heavily gendered, with boy groups and girl groups often appealing to different demographic segments and advertiser categories. Adding a girl group diversified Big Hit's market exposure and opened doors to brand partnerships and content opportunities that an all-male roster couldn't access. But the Source Music acquisition didn't play out smoothly in its initial phase. Jimin's contracts expired in May 2021, and all 6 members chose not to renew. The group effectively disbanded, and Source Music was left without its flagship act. From the outside, this looked like a setback. Internally, however, Hybe and Source Music were already working on something new. In May 2022, Source Music debuted LE SSERAFIM, a 5-member girl group featuring Sakura and Kim Chae-won, both former members of IZ*ONE, a project group that had been formed through the reality competition show Produce 48. LE SSERAFIM's debut mini-album, Fearless, sold over 300,000 copies in its first week, and the group quickly became one of the fastest-growing acts in K-pop. By their second album, Antifragile, released in October 2022, the group had established itself as a commercial force, with the title track going viral on social media platforms globally. LE SSERAFIM would go on to become one of Hybe's most important non-BTS revenue generators, proving that the Source Music acquisition, despite the loss of Jimin, ultimately delivered strategic value. The second major acquisition came in May 2020, when Big Hit purchased Pledis Entertainment. This one was bigger in every sense. Pledis was one of Korea's established entertainment companies, founded in 2010 by Han Sung-soo, a former executive at SM Entertainment. Pledis had a track record of producing commercially successful groups, most notably 17 and NXT, along with the girl group Pristin, which had already disbanded by the time of the acquisition. 17 was the prize. The 13-member group had debuted in 2015 and built one of the most dedicated fan bases in K-pop, known as Carrots. What made 17 unique in the industry was their self-producing model. The members were heavily involved in songwriting, choreography, and creative direction, divided into 3 specialized units: hip-hop, vocal, and performance. This creative autonomy gave the group a distinctive identity and a level of artistic credibility that resonated deeply with fans. By 2020, Seventeen was already selling millions of albums per release cycle in South Korea and had a particularly strong following in Japan, one of the world's largest music markets. The financial impact of acquiring Pledis was substantial. Seventeen's album sales alone contributed billions of Korean won annually to Hybe's consolidated revenue. Their fourth studio album, Face the Sun, released in May 2022, sold over 4 million copies, making Seventeen only the third K-pop act in history to surpass that threshold at the time, joining BTS and, briefly, the project group X1. Their follow-up, FML, in April 2023, shattered even that record, selling over 6.2 million copies in its first month and becoming the best-selling K-pop album of all time at that point. Seventeen was no longer just a strong roster addition. They were becoming a pillar of Hybe's entire financial structure, the single most important act in the company's portfolio outside of BTS. NESD, the other major Pledis group, had a different trajectory. The five-member group had debuted in 2012 and experienced a career resurgence in 2017 after members appeared on the reality show, Produce 101 Season 2. Member Hwang Min-yoon was selected for the project Group 101, and the resulting publicity revived interest in NESD. However, by the time of the Pledis acquisition, NESD was in the later stages of its career. The group officially disbanded in March 2022 after their contracts expired. While NESD didn't become a long-term revenue driver for Hybe, the acquisition of Pledis was never primarily about NESD, it was about Seventeen, and on that front, the investment paid off decisively. Then came the deal that changed everything. On April 2, 2021, Hybe announced the acquisition of Ithaca Holdings for approximately $1.05 billion. This was not a K-pop industry transaction. This was Hybe stepping onto the global entertainment stage and buying one of the most influential management and media companies in the American music industry. Ithaca Holdings was the brainchild of Scooter Braun, one of the most powerful and controversial figures in Western music. Braun had discovered Justin Bieber in 2008 by finding his YouTube videos, and he built SB Projects into a management powerhouse representing some of the biggest names in pop music. At the time of the acquisition, SB Projects' client roster included Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Demi Lovato, J Balvin, and several other globally recognized artists. The management company generated revenue through management fees, typically around 15 to 20% of each artist's gross earnings across touring, album sales, brand endorsements, and media appearances. But Ithaca Holdings wasn't just SB Projects. The holding company also owned Big Machine Records, the Nashville-based independent label founded by Scott Borchetta in 2005. Big Machine was best known as the original label home of Taylor Swift. It owned the master recordings of Swift's first 6 studio albums, a catalog that had been at the center of one of the most publicized disputes in modern music history. When Ithaca Holdings acquired Big Machine in 2019 for an estimated $300 million, Taylor Swift publicly condemned the deal, stating she had not been given a fair opportunity to purchase her own masters and that she did not want Scooter Braun to own her life's work. Swift subsequently re-recorded those albums as Taylor's version releases, a strategy that was commercially successful and culturally unprecedented. By the time Hybe acquired Ithaca Holdings, the Taylor Swift master recordings were a depreciating asset. Swift's re-recordings were actively cannibalizing streams and sales of the originals. But Big Machine's catalog extended well beyond Swift. The label had signed Florida Georgia Line, Thomas Rhett, Reba McEntire, Sheryl Crow, and other country and pop artists whose catalogs continued to generate streaming royalties and licensing revenue. The $1.05 billion price tag for Ithaca Holdings was the largest acquisition in Hybe's history by a wide margin, and it raised eyebrows across both the Korean and American entertainment industries. The strategic logic, however, was straightforward from Hybe's perspective. The deal accomplished 3 things simultaneously. First, it gave Hybe direct access to the American music market, the largest music market in the world by revenue, through established management relationships with a list Western artists. Second, it provided a catalog of English-language master recordings that generated passive royalty income independent of any K-pop activity. Third, it positioned Hybe as a truly global entertainment company, not just a Korean one, which was critical for maintaining investor confidence and commanding premium market valuations on the Korea exchange. Hybe America, the U.S. subsidiary that absorbed Ithaca Holdings operations, became the company's Western headquarters. Based in Los Angeles, Hybe America was tasked with managing the Western artist roster, overseeing Big Machine Records operations, and developing new projects tailored to the American and European markets. Scooter Braun initially served as the CEO of Hybe America, bridging the gap between the Korean parent company and the American entertainment ecosystem. Number 4. The passive revenue machine, BTS. On June 14, 2022, BTS sat down for a dinner broadcast during their annual Festa celebration, the yearly event marking their debut anniversary, and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the global entertainment industry. The members explained that they needed time to pursue individual projects and personal growth. They didn't use the word disbandment. They didn't even use the word hiatus. Initially, Hybe later clarified that the group was entering a hiatus period, not breaking up. But the message was clear: BTS as a functioning, promoting, album-releasing, touring 7-member unit was stepping back from group activities for the foreseeable future. Within hours, Hybe's stock price dropped by over 25%, wiping out roughly $1.7 billion in market capitalization in a single trading session. The market's reaction was instant, visceral, and telling. Investors still viewed BTS as the foundation of Hybe's value proposition, regardless of how many acquisitions the company had made. Then came military service. South Korean law requires all able-bodied male citizens to complete approximately 18 months of mandatory military duty. For years, there had been public debate about whether BTS should receive an exemption, similar to exemptions granted to Olympic medalists and classical musicians who won major international competitions. In December 2020, the National Assembly revised the Military Service Act to allow pop culture artists of outstanding achievement to defer their enlistment until age 30. A provision widely understood to have been created specifically for BTS. But deferral is not exemption. The clock was still ticking. Jimin, the oldest member at 30, was the first to enlist. He entered the Korean Army's basic military training on December 13, 2022, at the 5th Infantry Division Recruit Training Center in Yongkyeon, Gyeonggi Province. J-Hope followed on April 18, 2023, enlisting as an active duty soldier. Suga began his military service in September 2023, serving as a social service agent, an alternative form of service available to individuals with certain physical conditions. In Suga's case related to a shoulder injury he had sustained before his debut. RM and V enlisted together on December 11, 2023. Jimin and Jungkook entered service the following day, December 12, 2023. By the end of 2023, all 7 members of BTS were serving in the South Korean military in various capacities, and the group's active commercial operations had effectively ceased. This is the point where most entertainment acts would simply stop generating meaningful revenue. No new music. No concert tours. No variety show appearances. No brand campaign shoots. No fan meetings. For a typical artist, going dark for 18 months to 2 years would mean near total revenue cessation. But BTS was never a typical artist, and the revenue didn't stop. It didn't even come close to stopping. The first and most obvious source of continued income was streaming royalties. By the time BTS went on hiatus, they had accumulated one of the most valuable music catalogs in the history of popular music, not just K-pop, but popular music globally. The numbers are staggering in their scale. On Spotify alone, BTS had accumulated over 30 billion total streams across their discography by 2023. Individual tracks had reached astronomical figures. Dynamite, their first English-language single released in August 2020, had surpassed 1.9 billion streams on Spotify. Butter, released in May 2021, crossed 1.3 billion. Boy with Love, featuring Halsey, exceeded 1.5 billion. Fake Love cleared 1.1 billion. DNA passed 1.2 billion. These weren't flash in the pan viral hits that spiked and disappeared. They were catalog tracks that continued to accumulate millions of streams per month years after their initial release. Every single stream generated a royalty payment. The per-stream rate on Spotify varies by market and subscription tier, but industry estimates typically place it between 0.003 A N D 0.003 and 0.005 per stream. At 30 billion cumulative streams, even a conservative per-stream calculation puts Spotify revenue alone in the range of 90 to 150 million over the catalog's lifetime. And Spotify is only one platform. BTS's music was also streamed on Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Melon, Genie, Bugs, and numerous other services across different countries. YouTube represented another massive passive revenue channel. BTS's official YouTube channel, Bangtan, had over 75 million subscribers. Their music videos had collectively accumulated over 30 billion views. Dynamite alone crossed 1.8 billion views. Boy with Love exceeded 1.7 billion. DNA surpassed 1.9 billion views, making it one of the most watched music videos in YouTube history. Mic Drop, Steve Aoki Remix, passed 1.3 billion. Idol exceeded 1.1 billion. These music videos continued to generate advertising revenue regardless of whether BTS was actively promoting. YouTube's ad revenue share model pays creators approximately 55% of advertising revenue generated on their content. For videos with billions of views, the cumulative ad revenue is substantial. Industry analysts have estimated that BTS's YouTube catalog generates millions of dollars annually in ad revenue alone, entirely passively. But streaming and YouTube were just the baseline. Before enlisting, the BTS members executed a carefully sequenced rollout of solo projects that extended the group's commercial activity well into the military service period. This wasn't accidental, it was a deliberate strategy, coordinated between the members and Hybe, to maintain revenue flow and fan engagement during the transition to military service. J-Hope was the first to release solo material under the hiatus framework. His album, Jack in the Box, dropped on July 15, 2022, exactly 1 month after the hiatus announcement. More significantly, J-Hope headlined Lollapalooza in Chicago on July 31, 2022, becoming the first South Korean artist to headline a major American music festival. The performance was broadcast globally and generated significant media coverage, keeping BTS-adjacent content in the public conversation. RM released his solo album, Indigo, on December 2, 2022, featuring collaborations with Erykah Badu, Anderson .Paak, Eugene, and other artists. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and was critically well received for its introspective, art-influenced approach. Gene released the single, The Astronaut, on October 28, 2022, co-written with Coldplay, just weeks before his military enlistment. The single charted in multiple countries and gave fans a final new release from Gene before his service began. Suga released his third solo mixtape, D-Day, on April 21, 2023, under his alter ego August D. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 with 97,000 album equivalent units in its first week, a remarkable figure for a K-pop solo release. Suga then embarked on a solo world tour, also titled D-Day, which visited cities across Asia, North America, and Europe throughout the first half of 2023. The tour grossed tens of millions of dollars and sold out venues including the United Center in Chicago, the Prudential Center in Newark, UBS Arena in New York, and the KSPO Dome in Seoul. Jimin's solo debut was a commercial thunderbolt. His album, Face, released on March 24, 2023, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with 102,000 album equivalent units, making Jimin the first Korean solo artist to top the Billboard 200. The lead single, Like Crazy, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Jimin the first Korean solo artist to achieve that milestone as well. Those weren't marginal chart positions achieved through bundling tricks or promotional gimmicks. They were genuine first-week sales and streaming numbers that placed Jimin alongside the biggest solo artists in the world. V released Layover on September 8, 2023, a laid-back, R&B-influenced album that debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The album's more understated commercial rollout reflected V's artistic preferences, but it still moved significant units and demonstrated solo commercial viability. Then came Jungkook, whose solo output during the pre-enlistment window was arguably the most commercially explosive of any BTS member. His single 7 featuring Lado, released on July 14, 2023, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and broke the Spotify record for the most streamed song in a single day at the time of its release, accumulating over 15 million streams within 24 hours. 7 wasn't a slow burn album track, it was a full-throttle global pop hit that dominated charts worldwide. Jungkook's debut solo album, Golden, released on November 3, 2023, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The album's second single, Standing Next to You, a funk and disco-influenced track, peaked at number 5 on the Hot 100 and further cemented Jungkook's profile as a solo pop artist with crossover appeal. Every single one of these solo projects generated revenue for Hybe. The album sales, streaming royalties, publishing income from songwriting credits, and touring revenue all flowed through Hybe's subsidiary labels and contributed to the parent company's consolidated financial results. The solo releases weren't just artistic statements, they were commercial products strategically timed to fill the revenue gap that the group's hiatus had created. And they worked. Hybe's 2023 financial results, reported in February 2024, showed total revenue of approximately 2.18 trillion Korean won, roughly $1.67 billion US, an increase from the previous year, despite the fact that BTS had not promoted as a group for the entire calendar year. Number 3, the new guard, Hybe's roster. When Hybe executives talked about reducing BTS dependency, they weren't speaking in abstractions. They were talking about specific groups, real artists with real album sales, real touring revenue, and real fan bases that the company had either developed internally or acquired through corporate transactions. By the mid-2020s, Hybe's active artist roster included over a dozen acts spread across multiple subsidiary labels, spanning boy groups, girl groups, solo artists, and even a multinational group designed specifically for the Western market. Some of these acts had grown into genuine commercial powerhouses capable of selling millions of albums and filling arenas on their own. Others were still building momentum. Together, they formed the foundation of Hybe's post-BTS financial argument, the case that the company had enough collective star power to sustain itself even if its biggest act stepped away permanently. But examining each of these artists individually, their actual numbers, their real market reach, their measurable cultural impact, reveals a more nuanced picture than the corporate narrative might suggest. Start with 17, because 17 is the act that comes closest to filling the BTS-sized gap in Hybe's roster. The 13-member group debuted on May 26, 2015, under Pledis Entertainment, 2 years after BTS, and under an entirely different label, long before Pledis became part of the Hybe ecosystem. 17's structure was unlike any other group in K-pop. The 13 members were organized into 3 specialized subunits, a hip-hop unit led by S.Kuz, a vocal unit led by Woozi, and a performance unit led by Hoshi. What set 17 apart from its peers was the degree of creative involvement the members had in every aspect of their output. Woozi served as the group's primary songwriter and producer, having composed and arranged the majority of 17's discography. Performance unit leader Hoshi choreographed most of the group's dance routines. This self-producing model gave 17 a creative identity that felt distinctly their own, and it generated deep loyalty among fans who recognized the artistic labor behind the music. The commercial trajectory was steady but accelerating. 17's early albums sold well by mid-tier K-pop standards, but didn't immediately approach BTS-level figures. That changed dramatically in the early 2020s. Their ninth mini-album, Ithaca, released in October 2021, sold over 2 million copies, a milestone that placed 17 among the elite tier of K-pop album sellers. Their fourth studio album, Face the Sun, released in May 2022, pushed past 4 million copies sold, a figure that would have been remarkable for any act in any genre. But it was FML, their 10th mini-album, released on April 24, 2023, that rewrote the record books. FML sold over 6.2 million copies within its first month of release, making it the best-selling K-pop album of all time at that point. The number was so large that it briefly seemed like a reporting error. It wasn't. FML moved physical units at a rate that surpassed anything BTS had achieved with a single release, a fact that stunned industry observers and validated Hybe's acquisition of Pledis Entertainment in the most direct way possible. 17's touring capacity reinforced the commercial picture. Their Be the Sun World Tour, which ran from June 2022 through March 2023, visited 26 cities across Asia, North America, and Europe, with multiple sold-out arena dates in cities including Seoul, Tokyo, Jakarta, Los Angeles, New York, and London. The Follow tour in 2023 and 2024 expanded their live footprint further, including stadium-level shows in South Korea and Japan. Japan was a particularly important market for 17. The group maintained a dedicated Japanese discography, released Japanese-language versions of their Korean hits, and consistently ranked among the top-selling artists in Japan's Oricon charts. Given that Japan is the world's second-largest music market by revenue, 17's dominance there represented serious financial value for Hybe. On the Billboard 200, the benchmark chart for album performance in the United States, 17 had achieved multiple top 5 debuts. FML debuted at number 2. 17th Heaven, released in October 2023, also debuted at number 2. These weren't flukes driven by a single promotional push. They reflected a consistently growing American fan base that was purchasing albums in volumes competitive with major Western acts. 17 had reached a level of commercial maturity where they could reasonably be described as one of the biggest active boy groups in the world, not just in K-pop. Then there was TXT Tomorrow X Together, the group that bore perhaps the heaviest burden of expectation in the entire Hybe ecosystem. TXT debuted on March 4, 2019 under Big Hit Music, the same label that managed BTS. They were, by definition, BTS's juniors, the first new group launched by Big Hit since BTS's debut 6 years earlier. The pressure was immense. Every aspect of TXT's career would inevitably be compared to BTS, and the 5 members Subin, Yeonjun, Byamju, Taehyung, and Huinenkai had to carve out their own identity while operating under the shadow of the biggest act their label had ever produced. To their credit, TXT did exactly that. Their musical identity leaned into alternative pop, rock-influenced production, and coming-of-age thematic concepts that resonated with a slightly younger demographic than BTS's core audience. Their debut album, The Dream Chapter, Star, sold over 100,000 copies in its first month, a strong start by K-pop debut standards. Each subsequent release built on the previous one. By 2022, TXT was selling over 1 million copies per album. Their 5th mini-album, The Name Chapter, Temptation, released in January 2023, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with 120,000 album equivalent units, making TXT the 4th K-pop act to reach number 1 on the chart after BTS, Blackpink, and Stray Kids. TXT's American market penetration was particularly noteworthy. They headlined Lollapalooza in Chicago in August 2023, performing on the main stage in front of a massive crowd. They appeared on major American television programs. They sold out U.S. arena tours. Their English-language interviews and social media presence gave them an accessibility to Western fans that many K-pop groups struggled to achieve. TXT had become a commercially viable arena-level act with a dedicated global fan base, MA, that was fiercely loyal and highly organized. Hybe occupied a different but important position in the Hybe roster. The seven-member group, Youngwon, Heesung, Jae, Jake, Sunghoon, Sinu, and Nike debuted on November 30th, 2020, under Belift Lab, a joint venture between Hybe and CJ&M. Hybe was formed through iLand, a 2020 survival reality show produced by the two companies, in which trainees competed for spots in the final group. The show aired on net and generated significant pre-debut buzz, giving Hybe an established fan base, called Engine, before they had even released a single song. Hybe's commercial growth was rapid. Their debut album, Border, Day One, sold over 300,000 copies in its first week, one of the strongest debut figures in K-pop history at the time. Each subsequent release escalated. Dimension, Dilemma, in October 2021, sold over 1 million copies in its first month. Dark Blood, released in May 2023, debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200. By their third year of activity, Hybe was consistently selling over 1 million copies per album, touring internationally and maintaining a strong presence on both Korean and Japanese charts. Their vampiric, dark fantasy concept set them apart aesthetically from other Hybe groups, and their performance-heavy approach attracted fans who appreciated technically demanding choreography. LE Seraphim, Source Music's flagship group after the disbandment of G4IND, debuted on May 2, 2022, with 6 members, though Kim Garam was removed from the group in July 2022 following bullying allegations, leaving the group as a 5-member act. The remaining members Sakura, Kim Chaewon, Ha Yeonjin, Kazuha, and Hong Eun-chae brought a mix of experience and fresh talent to the group. Sakura and Kim Chaewon were both former members of IZ*ONE, the project group formed through Produce 48, and they brought established fanbases and industry visibility to LE Seraphim from day one. Number 2, the irreplaceable core, BTS. Everything discussed so far, the diversification strategy, the acquisitions, the new roster, the passive revenue streams, paints a picture of a company that has done the work. Hybe has spent years and billions of dollars building infrastructure designed to withstand exactly this scenario. On paper, the spreadsheets say survival is possible. The revenue streams are multiple. The artist roster is deep. The platform business is growing. But paper doesn't trade on the Korea exchange. Paper doesn't fill stadiums. Paper doesn't get invited to the White House. And when you strip away the optimistic corporate narrative and look at what a permanent BTS disbandment would actually mean for Hybe, not a hiatus, not military service, but a permanent end to the group, the impact would be far more severe and far more multidimensional than any revenue diversification chart can capture. Start with the most immediate and measurable impact, the stock price. Hybe's relationship with the Korean stock market has always been, at its core, a relationship with BTS. When Hybe, then Big Hit Entertainment, went public on the Korea Exchange on October 15, 2020, the IPO priced shares at 135,000 won. Shares opened at 270,000 won, a 100% premium that valued the company at approximately $8.7 billion. That valuation wasn't based on Weverse user metrics or the projected earnings of TXT. It was based on BTS. Institutional investors, retail investors, and market analysts all understood that they were buying shares in BTS's commercial future, wrapped in a corporate structure. The IPO prospectus made this explicit. The 97% revenue dependency was disclosed in black and white, and investors bought in anyway because they believed the upside of BTS's trajectory outweighed the concentration risk. The market sensitivity to BTS-related news has been demonstrated repeatedly and unambiguously. On June 14, 2022, when BTS announced their group hiatus during the Festa dinner broadcast, HYB shares plummeted. The stock dropped over 25% in a single trading session, erasing approximately $1.7 billion in market capitalization within hours. Trading was so volatile that the stock triggered circuit breakers, automatic trading halts designed to prevent panic selling. HYB's management scrambled to issue a clarifying statement, emphasizing that BTS was not disbanding and that the members would continue individual activities. The stock partially recovered in subsequent days, but the episode laid bare a fundamental truth. The market did not fully buy the diversification narrative. When it came down to it, investors still priced HYB primarily as a BTS vehicle. This wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout 2022 and 2023, HYB's stock price showed measurable correlations with BTS-related news cycles. Positive developments, strong solo album debuts, record-breaking streaming milestones, the announcement of Jin's military discharge date tended to lift the stock. Negative or ambiguous developments, enlistment confirmations, the New Jeans management crisis, uncertainty about group reunion timelines, applied downward pressure. Analysts at Korean securities firms including Myri Asset Securities, NH Investment and Securities, and Korea Investment and Securities consistently cited BTS's activity status as a key variable in their HYB valuation models. Not the only variable, 17's album sales, Weverse growth metrics, and overall industry trends were also factored in, but BTS's status remained the single most weight-carrying input in virtually every published analyst note. Now imagine the market reaction to a permanent disbandment announcement. Not a hiatus, with an implicit promise of return. Not military service with a defined end date. A final, unambiguous statement that BTS would never record together again, never tour together again, never appear as a group again. The stock impact would likely dwarf the June 2022 drop. Investors who remained in HYB partly because they were pricing in a BTS reunion and the massive revenue that a comeback album and world tour would generate would need to completely reprice the stock without that optionality. The reunion premium embedded in HYB's market capitalization would evaporate overnight. Depending on market conditions and investor sentiment at the time, a permanent disbandment could plausibly trigger a 30 to 40% decline in HYB's stock price, potentially wiping out several $billion in market value. That's not speculation. It's an extrapolation from the market's demonstrated behavior during less severe BTS-related negative events. Beyond the stock market, a BTS disbandment would fundamentally alter HYB's standing in the global media landscape. BTS's cultural significance extended far beyond the music industry. The group addressed the United Nations General Assembly on 4 separate occasions in 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022, delivering speeches on topics including youth empowerment, mental health, climate action, and vaccine equity in partnership with UNICEF's Love Myself campaign. No other K-pop group had been afforded that platform. No other pop music act of any genre had maintained that level of sustained engagement with the world's foremost international diplomatic body. When BTS spoke at the UN, they weren't speaking as HYB employees, they were speaking as global cultural figures whose reach and influence warranted a seat at a table normally reserved for heads of state and Nobel laureates. In May 2022, BTS visited the White House and met with President Joe Biden to discuss anti-Asian hate crimes and discrimination, coinciding with the final day of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The visit generated massive global media coverage. Every major news outlet, from CNN to the BBC to NHK to Al Jazeera, covered the event. This wasn't a photo opportunity at a music award show. This was the President of the United States hosting a K-pop group to discuss a serious policy issue. The soft power implications were enormous for BTS, for South Korea, and for HYB as the corporate entity that managed the group. BTS received multiple Grammy nominations, including 3 consecutive nominations for Best Pop Duo/Group Performance in 2021, 2022, and 2023. They performed at the Grammy Awards ceremony multiple times, sharing stages with artists like Lil Nas X, Megan Thee Stallion, and Olivia Rodrigo. They were named to Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People list. They graced the covers of Rolling Stone, Vogue, GQ, Vanity Fair, and Esquire. They appeared on every major American late-night television show: The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, The Late Late Show with James Corden, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Not as novelty guests, but as headlining acts commanding full performance segments and extended interviews. This level of mainstream Western media penetration is something no other HYB act has achieved and, critically, something that cannot be manufactured through marketing spend alone. BTS earned these platforms through a combination of commercial scale, cultural timing, and genuine public interest. The media covered BTS because BTS was a phenomenon, because a Korean language group selling out stadiums in the United States and shifting billions of dollars in economic activity was genuinely newsworthy. 17 selling 6 million albums is a remarkable commercial achievement, but it doesn't generate a White House invitation. TXT headlining Lollapalooza is impressive, but it doesn't result in a UN General Assembly address. The media footprint that BTS created for HYB was qualitatively different from what any other act on the roster could produce, and losing that footprint would reduce HYB's visibility in mainstream global discourse dramatically. The fandom dimension adds another layer of complexity. ARMY, BTS's global fan base, is not merely large. It is arguably the most organized, most mobilized, and most economically influential fan community in the history of popular music. ARMY's organizational sophistication operates at a level that blurs the line between fandom and social movement. Fan accounts coordinate synchronized streaming campaigns that can move songs up global charts within hours. Bulk purchasing groups organize album buys across dozens of countries simultaneously. Translation accounts make BTS content accessible in real time across languages including English, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Arabic, French, and dozens more. Charity initiatives organized under the ARMY banner have raised millions of dollars for causes including the Black Lives Matter movement, COVID-19 relief, education programs, and environmental organizations. ARMY's economic power is not just directed at BTS products. ARMY functions as a discovery funnel for the entire HYB ecosystem. A significant portion of the fanbases for TXT, Hybe, LE Seraphim, and other HYB groups entered the K-pop space through BTS. They became BTS fans first, then explored other HYB acts because of the corporate association. This gateway effect is difficult to quantify precisely, but its existence is widely acknowledged within the industry. K-pop market researchers have noted that HYB groups consistently outperform expectations for new debuts compared to groups from other companies, and the most commonly cited explanation is that HYB benefits from spillover awareness generated by BTS and ARMY. When a new HYB group debuts, it doesn't debut into a vacuum, it debuts into an ecosystem where millions of BTS fans are already paying attention to HYB's output, creating a built-in awareness advantage that no amount of marketing spend from a competing company can replicate. Number 1. The new reality, HYB. Every fact in this countdown has been building toward a single, uncomfortable truth, the kind of truth that doesn't fit neatly into a bullish investor presentation or a reassuring press release. HYB will probably survive without BTS. The company has done more than enough to ensure its own continuity. But survival and dominance are fundamentally different outcomes, and the distance between them is exactly where HYB's future gets complicated. Let's start with what we know for certain, because the certainties matter before we speculate. HYB, as of its most recent fiscal disclosures, operates with annual revenues exceeding 2 trillion Korean won roughly 1.5 T. O. 1.5 to 1.7 billion USD, depending on exchange rate fluctuations. The company controls multiple subsidiary labels managing over a dozen active artist groups. It owns and operates Weverse, a global fan engagement platform with over 100 million cumulative downloads and active user communities spanning artists from Hybe, YG Entertainment, Universal Music Group, and other labels. It holds a significant music catalog, including both Korean and American recordings through its ownership of Big Machine Records. It has an established presence in the 3 largest music markets in the world, the United States, Japan, and South Korea. It maintains technology investments in artificial intelligence, gaming, and content production infrastructure. By every structural metric, Hybe is a large, diversified, multinational entertainment and technology corporation. That structural resilience is real, and dismissing it would be dishonest. The Hybe of 2025 is not the big hit entertainment of 2018, when a single group's hiatus would have been an extinction-level event. The company has deliberately and systematically built layers of insulation between its corporate survival and BTS's activity status. Those layers exist. They function. And in a scenario where BTS permanently disbands, they would prevent the kind of catastrophic financial collapse that some observers have predicted. But here's what the structural analysis misses. Hybe's current market position, its stock valuation, its brand prestige, its ability to attract top-tier partnerships and talent, isn't based solely on structural fundamentals. It's based on a narrative. And that narrative, whether Hybe's management likes to admit it or not, still has BTS at its center. Consider how Hybe is perceived by the global entertainment industry. When international media outlets write about Hybe, the first reference point is invariably BTS. When business publications profile the company, Forbes, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the lead almost always begins with BTS. When Hybe's executives take meetings with potential Western partners, the implicit credibility that opens those doors is the fact that this is the company that built and managed the biggest musical act to come out of Asia in the modern era. 17's album sales are impressive. TXT's Billboard performance is notable. LE Seraphim's Coachella appearance is interesting. But none of those achievements, individually or collectively, carries the same weight in a first sentence as the company behind BTS. That introductory credibility, the ability to walk into any room in the global entertainment industry and command immediate respect, is a function of BTS's legacy. And it depreciates the moment BTS becomes a historical act rather than an active one. The financial modeling tells a similar story if you're willing to look past the top-line revenue numbers. Hybe's current market capitalization on the Korea exchange prices in an implicit assumption about BTS's future. Even during the military service period, analysts and investors maintained a reunion premium in their valuations, the expectation that BTS would eventually reconvene as a group, release new music, embark on a world tour, and generate a massive revenue spike that would flow directly to Hybe's bottom line. A reunion tour alone, based on the scale of BTS's previous touring operations, could reasonably be projected to gross $300 million or more. A comeback album, given the pent-up demand from a multi-year absence, could sell 10 million copies or more within its first month. These aren't fantasy projections, they're conservative extrapolations from BTS's demonstrated commercial history, adjusted for the premium that reunion events typically command across the entertainment industry. Remove the reunion from the equation permanently, and that premium disappears from the stock price. The valuation model reverts to a sum-of-parts calculation based on the actual earning power of Hybe's remaining assets, 17's album and touring revenue, TXT's commercial trajectory, LE Seraphim's growth curve. In Hybe's market position, Weverse platform economics, Big Machine Records catalog income, and the various other revenue streams the company has assembled. Those are real assets with real value. But they don't add up to the same number. The gap between Hybe with BTS reunion optionality and Hybe without BTS ever is measured in billions of dollars of market capitalization, and closing that gap through organic growth from other artists would take years, if it's achievable at all. The competitive landscape adds further pressure. Hybe doesn't operate in isolation. The Korean entertainment industry is intensely competitive, with SM Entertainment, JYP Entertainment, YG Entertainment, and newer players like Starship Entertainment, Cube Entertainment, and Kakao Entertainment all vying for market share, fan attention, and brand partnership dollars. Hybe's competitive moat, the structural advantage that allowed it to command premium pricing, attract top trainees, and secure the best partnership terms, was substantially built on the prestige of being BTS's company. Without BTS, that moat narrows. Consider the trainee recruitment pipeline, which is the lifeblood of the K-pop industry's long-term competitiveness. The most talented aspiring performers in Korea, and increasingly from around the world, choose which company to audition for based partly on that company's reputation and track record. Being the company that produced BTS made Hybe the most prestigious destination for trainee talent. The best dancers, the best vocalists, the most charismatic performers disproportionately sought out Hybe auditions because they wanted to follow in BTS's footsteps. Because they believed Hybe's training system and creative infrastructure gave them the best chance of global success. That talent pipeline advantage is real and it compounds over time. Better trainees produce more successful groups, which attract more trainees, which produces the next generation of successful groups. Remove BTS from the equation, and Hybe's gravitational pull on the trainee market weakens. Not disappears. 17, TXT, and other groups still provide meaningful prestige, but weakens relative to competitors who are investing heavily in their own talent development and global expansion strategies. And number one, where we just landed, brought it all down to the core truth. Hybe can survive. Hybe will probably remain big. But Hybe without BTS is a fundamentally different entity than Hybe with BTS. The revenue can be partially replaced. The cultural capital cannot. The market premium can be partially rebuilt. The narrative power cannot. The roster can grow. The origin story cannot be rewritten. BTS didn't just build Hybe. BTS defined Hybe. And when the defining element of any entity is removed, whether that entity is a company, a movement, or a cultural moment, what remains is functional, viable, and real, but it is not the same thing. It can never be the same thing. So the next time someone asks you whether Hybe would still be big without BTS, you have the facts to answer honestly. Yes, but with an asterisk the size of a stadium. Because the numbers tell the story of a company that prepared for this moment. And the numbers also tell the story of a moment that can never be prepared for, the day when the thing that made everything possible is no longer there. That's the truth about Hybe. That's the truth about BTS. And that's a truth worth remembering the next time you watch a company try to outgrow its own foundation. Thanks for watching. If this gave you something to think about, you already know what to do.